Next one we're talking about, Dawn, is Tulane at number 15, Oklahoma. This game is at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. The storyline to know in this game is, how does Oklahoma respond after a scare against Houston this past weekend? Oklahoma entered that Houston game as 27.5-point favorites. They only beat Houston by 4. And it was a game where the Sooners were on defense with just a 2-point lead and under 2 minutes left, where Donovan Smith had an opportunity to lead them down the field and take the lead and maybe win the game. But Oklahoma's defense came up big and scored a safety to seal the victory. And the week before, you got to remember, UNLV dominated Houston by a score of 27-7. Oklahoma can't afford to look this sloppy this week against Tulane. This past weekend, Tulane, against a really good team in Kansas State, took them down on the wire and only lost by a touchdown. And in fact, in that game, Tulane had the ball on the 16-yard line with 12 seconds left before throwing an interception in the end zone. So they could have tied that game and went to overtime, and they threw a pick in the end zone to lose the game. And now Kansas State is ranked one spot higher than Oklahoma. So if you just look at the AP poll, it stands to reason, hey, Tulane played that well against Kansas State. They could do that well against Oklahoma as well. So I'm excited to see, how does Oklahoma respond after a rough game against Houston, and can Tulane continue this and still play like a really close competition against a top 15 team?
Tell you what, when we talked about Tulane in the preseason, we were a little worried with all the talent they had leaving, and Willie Fritz going to Houston and John Summerall coming in from Troy. We were worried about what they might look like with Michael Pratt gone, who had started the last 4 years. And I think the most interesting thing is we were looking through all the starting quarterbacks. We were trying to figure out all the quarterback competitions, right, about first, second week of August. And we thought for sure it was going to be Ty Thompson, the transfer
Easily.
From Oregon.
Because he's a 5-star.
And I remember it was like maybe the first or second week of August, and I mentioned to you, I said, there's whispers that they're going to start this redshirt freshman, Darian Mensah. There's people around New Orleans are saying, they're like, he's getting the first team reps.
And me being the 5-star lover, I was like, no way.
Yeah,
Ty Thompson's a 5-star.
And they named him the starter, and they have no reason to turn back. And I'm just going to dive right into the matchup. Look, Mensah's looked really good, and he's been a really good complement. Look, the engine of this Tulane offense is their star running back, Mekhi Hughes. Okay, he's the engine. What Darian Mensah has done is just come in and played great complementary football. And you mentioned, look, they had a lead. They had a 10-point lead on Kansas State.
They did.
What Mensah does is complement Hughes with just tremendous play-action passing. That 91.2 passing grade on play-action is right now the 8th best mark in the country. He is absolutely killing it on play-action. You could see it against Kansas State last week. Kansas State was lost in play because you have to step up and respect Hughes. And right now, especially down the middle of the field, Mensah's making all of the throws down the middle. When they've got deep crossers and they've got times to take shots when linebackers step up and even safeties are all over the place, they are taking shots downfield on play action. He is complementing Hughes and the rest of this offense so well. You got guys at receiver like Mario Williams, now the transfer from USC. They are making things happen down the field, and it's a part of Oklahoma's defense that they've got a lot of really talented players on defense, but it's not something they handle the best. Okay, last season, they ranked 31st out of 70 Power 5 teams in coverage grade against play action, which is kind of, obviously it's like mediocre, 31 out of 70. So far this season, it's 59th. And if you go back and look at Houston last week, and they didn't score a ton of points, they only scored 12 points, but pretty much all of Houston's best plays came on play action. And Oklahoma, they have really good players, but they have players who are really aggressive to the ball, right? We think about Billy Bowman and Danny Stutzman and guys in the middle of the field like that. Those guys are going to have to be a little more patient because Tulane's play-action game is killer. And you can just see the plan. You could see the plan right off rip when they played Kansas State. Let's get Hughes the first 4 or 5 touches of the game, and then let's just work right off of it. And it's working for Tulane right now. It's a game, honestly, they'll probably tell you it's a game they should have won. Yeah. I believe Mensah threw a pick 6 that gave K-State the lead or tied the game. I think it gave them the lead when they were tied at 20, but they dominated the first half of that game. They were ahead 20-10. They feel like they should have won that game, but the biggest reason was that Mensah was able to complement Hughes with play-action shots, and that's something Oklahoma, it's not necessarily in their comfort zone. So that's what I'm looking at. Obviously, they need to get Hughes going for it to work, but Mensah's playing really, really well.
That's a great point about Oklahoma's 2 best defensive players in Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman. That's the one word to describe them is aggressiveness.
Yes.
They fly to the football, which is a great thing when they're making big plays, but against a play action team, that could be a really big negative as well. So that's a great point by you. My matchup to watch when Oklahoma has the football, Jackson Arnold, the supporting cast around him has been worrisome. And I think a lot of people have looked at, Jackson Arnold's numbers and saying, this former 5-star recruit is disappointed so far. Dalton, I think he's played fine. I think the supporting cast around him has been far, far more concerning right now. Oklahoma currently has a 57.5 team receiving grade. If that sounds low, that's because it is. It is the second worst receiving grade among Power 4 schools right now. I will say this. A big reason for that low receiving grade is the fact that Nick Anderson, Jaleel Farouk, and Jaden Gibson, all of them are banged up right now. So you have Deion Burks, who's your number one receiver, and then a whole bunch of guys that weren't expected to be the starting guys for Oklahoma this year. So that is a big reason for that, but also those guys probably won't be playing in this game against Tulane either. So that receiving corps should still struggle in this game. The offensive line for Oklahoma has also really struggled. Right now, a 30.6% pressure rate allowed. That is 91st in the country. And the issue is Jackson Arnold is 100th among FBS quarterbacks under pressure with a 45.6 PFF grade. He's 36th when he's kept clean with an 84.8 PFF grade. So you're talking about a quarterback who, when he's kept clean and not under pressure, he's really good. When he is under pressure, he's not very good. And the issue is your offensive line is not protecting him right now, and the receivers for Oklahoma are not stepping up to all the new guys. And again, they have the excuse of a lot of injuries right now with Nick Anderson and Jaleel Farouk and Jaden Gibson all out. But they need the supporting cast for Arnold to step up. I will say this, though. Tulane has been extremely vulnerable against passing games this year. Right now, the Green Wave have a 64.3 team coverage grade. That is 102nd in the country, and they only pressure the quarterback on 26% of their passing plays, which is 103rd in the country. So the Sooners have a little bit of a get-right game now against Tulane in this pass defense, but if they struggle once again, it really might be time to start worrying about Oklahoma's offense as they enter SEC play.
Yeah, I agree for sure, because they need to look better than they looked last week. You mentioned Houston's loss to UNLV. They got dominated by UNLV. Yeah. They were giving up big plays. They were getting beat on the ground. This Oklahoma team just looked out of rhythm last week, and I do think this game – for Tulane, too, the stakes of it. Okay, they played K-State close. They were at one point, they were 8 yards from tying it again and maybe forcing overtime. It's a game they feel they should have won. I think we have to remember, too, with these group of 5 teams, play close or even win one of these games. I don't, Tulane, I think in maybe the old scenario of a 14 playoff, this might be a letdown game for them. I think they're going to come in. They're going to come in here believing they can win, and they can keep this close, and they can win. And they see what everybody sees with Oklahoma's offense, and they're going, listen, we just have to find ways to score enough points against the talented defense. So I think it's going to be tight. I really do. I think Oklahoma has a lot they're trying to figure out right now, and you mentioned it. They need to get right before they get into if they go into SEC play looking like they looked last week.
Tennessee next week.
If they go and play Tennessee looking like they played against Houston, that's going to be a long, long day.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dalton, you mentioned it, like Tulane now in this new expanded playoff. Tulane thinks, okay, I picked Tulane to win the American this year. Tulane's saying, hey, we have a better non-conference schedule than pretty much every other group of 5 team. They played close against a top 15 team already in Kansas State, and if they beat a top 15 team in Oklahoma, basically all Tulane needs to do after that is maybe lose one more time and then win the American, and then they're in. They're the school.
If you're a G5 team with one loss and you swept your conference and you beat Oklahoma and you lost a really tight game to K-State, you'll get that playoff spot.
Yeah.
You'll be the number 12 team in the country for sure.
So can Tulane pull off the upset over Oklahoma, or will the Sooners get a bounce back game a little bit against Tulane?
I think this is a harder game to pick than most people would think. And Tulane played really, really well last week, and they just crashed in a couple of big moments, especially the pick 6, and then late trying to tie the game. I think they had a big penalty, a holding penalty or something that dragged them back, and then they just couldn't punch it in one last time. I have Oklahoma 27-23. I do think this game could very well go as tight as it did last week for Tulane against K-State. Oklahoma's defense, they need to come through them. They need to come through for them right now. I think there's still going to be some rhythm that needs to be found with Jackson Arnold with this offense, and it might come down to whoever gets pressure on the quarterback, and I know it comes down to that a lot, but you have 2 quarterbacks right now with heavy splits between their passing performance when they're clean and when they're under pressure. So it's going to come down to a lot of things. Tulane, can they run the ball? Can Mekhi Hughes get enough yards to set up that play action? What does Oklahoma see on tape from the last 2 weeks of Tulane that they go, okay, these are the things we need to look for with this play action? Because that was the biggest thing, is Mensa making explosive plays in the passing game against K-State, and that's what got him ahead, and that's what kept him in it. Oklahoma's defense, I think right now with their offense kind of reeling a little bit, they need to be the unit that wins this game. I think they're going to do it. But I'm also a little weary on it. Tulane is a really good football team, and I thought they would have some sort of drop-off after losing all the talent they lost, especially Michael Pratt and some of the offensive crew. Chris Brazell went to Tennessee. I thought there would be a bigger drop-off, but it's a huge development in the American Conference in the Group of Five, and really early here in the season that Darian Mensa has been so good. I have Oklahoma, though, 27-23.
Yeah, shout out to John Summerall, too. By the way, we didn't mention it. Willie Fritz is gone. He's obviously now, ironically, the Houston coach now. And Summerall's come in and just kind of continued the success that Fritz has had. So, yeah, shout out to him. I got Oklahoma winning this game as well. I think it will be a close one. I got 27-17. I think the offense will bounce back a little bit against a vulnerable Tulane defense. And the Oklahoma defense continues to show why it's one of the better units that we have in college football. But even Dalton, Tulane fans hearing this might not be very happy, but even if they lose a close game to Oklahoma and they have 2 losses at the end of the year and they go 11-2, that still might be good enough to make the playoff.
It's at least something to think about. Yeah, if you don't get, say, a Memphis go undefeated, well, Memphis wouldn't go undefeated in that scenario, but if you don't get, say, a Boise or a UNLV to go undefeated, or a Texas State to do something, or something like, and these are 2 huge wins. You could argue they're the 2 biggest games, other than maybe Boise playing Oregon, that they're 2 of the biggest games that a Group of 5 team has played and will play. So it's for them to get this win, even though they didn't get the win last week, would change everything about the outlook of what could be the end result. And I think, honestly, you picked them to win the conference. I didn't go. I went into this year when we were predicting the American, and I was like, I don't know that Tulane can recover. They need a year off, don't they, after a couple of really good seasons? But apparently they didn't. So it's huge all the way around for this playoff race.
I know ball, Dawn. I know ball. I mean, maybe you don't. I think that explains that.
Hey, the records are the same right now. So.
That's fair. But like I'm saying, even if Tulane loses though in a close game, I think they still have a shot at making the playoff. Even with 2 losses. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it will be close. I really do.
Yeah, so do I. So, yeah, I got Oklahoma in this game 27-17. Going to be a great one.